The blue sign pulsed above my head like an electric sea. Gate 27B. I was 15 years old, carrying a purple backpack with a stuck zipper and the apple pie my grandmother taught me how to make in a cracked plastic container. My mother smoothed down her beige dress, ran her hand through her straight hair as if also smoothing the world itself, and whispered with that clinical smile, "Stay here for a minute. They're almost here. And please don't speak too loud. Don't embarrass me." The word she bit back hung between us like a bone. From the corridor came the smell of burnt coffee and microwaved cheese bread. The announcement blared over the loudspeaker, "Final call for Flight 431, and the voice sounded as distant as my own. My mother glanced at her watch, checked her phone, breathed like someone learning to cry without water, and looked back at me. Her eyes weren't hard. They were clinical. "They don't understand, honey. It's a delicate family." Then, lowering her tone, "You're too much yourself. I need you to be less today." I opened my mouth to ask, "What?" but she was already walking away, her heels clicking on the polished floor. Behind her, the reflections in the shop windows gave me back two versions of myself. The girl with hair pulled into an unruly puff, and the shadow trying to fit into my mother's outline. I watched as she answered her phone, smiled sideways, waved to someone outside my field of vision. A tall man, light skin, blue shirt. Next to him, two children in identical jackets. My mother raised her arm and touched his shoulder with familiarity. I moved forward one step too. The backpack felt heavier. She noticed. And then she came back, quickly, with that face reserved for important warnings. "You're not coming." The sound wasn't a shout. It was a scalpel. "I made arrangements for a presentation. Can't explain right now. You complicate things. I'll call you later." My throat became a bridge without cables. "Mom, I'll just stay quiet." She shook her head. "It's not just today. It's the whole image. Please don't make a scene." Behind her, the man smiled politely. The children looked at me like people look at a storefront. I smiled back, confused, and raised my hand in a greeting that found nothing on the other side but glass. She stuffed a $20 bill into my jacket pocket and pushed my hand down, a gesture small and monumental. "Stay here until I figure things out. Wait for me." I wanted to ask how long until lasts, but the word sat heavy on my tongue. The display changed color. At that moment her phone buzzed. She answered. "I'm coming now." 5 syllables that closed a door before it slammed. She turned without drama, without tears. Just that walk of someone who knows where they belong. And she left. People passed me like large fish in a school. Security guard approached, too gentle. "Miss, don't block the walkway, okay?" I dragged my feet to the side, leaned against the cold column and let the bag slide to the floor. I pulled from my pocket the bus stub to the airport and the baggage tag from my backpack, a reminder that I had been planned to arrive here. The plastic tag scratched my finger. The small pain brought me back to my body. I sat on the metal bench, the slats leaving marks on my jeans. I looked through the glass. My mother was disappearing toward the arrival gate, where the man and children waited. I watched the 3 heads move forward, a line that left me behind with the elegance of someone closing a browser tab. For a moment I thought about running. But where does someone start when they have nowhere to go? Baby cried nearby. A woman explained in English that the flight had been rescheduled. A young man photographed the terminal with flash and blinded me for a second. When my vision returned, my mother was no longer a body. She was just the idea of someone who had chosen. I grabbed the prepaid phone and dialed. "Voicemail." I tried again. "Voicemail." On the 3rd try, the recording answered with her voice. "Hi, leave a message." I heard the phrase like someone listening to an old song. I couldn't speak. A man in a gray hoodie sat next to me. The smell of school cigarettes clung to his jacket. "You okay?" I nodded a yes that wanted to say no. He pointed to a snack bar. "There's free water there." I thanked him with a thread of voice. I went to the counter. The woman gave me a cup that trembled in my wet hands. I returned to the bench. The backpack tag came loose a bit more. I ripped it off completely without thinking and put it in my pocket. That rectangle with date and time seemed to laugh at me and yet anchored me to a time I could prove. 2011, November, 6:42 p.m. When night truly fell, an employee with a badge came to ask who I was waiting for. I said, "My mother," and heard my own voice as if coming from underwater. He asked for a phone number, wrote it down, made a call. Then another. Then he called a woman in a yellow vest who spoke quietly. "We're going to help you." I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because the pain in that instant occupied all the space I had. On the way to the support room, I passed gate 27B again. The blue light made my face look different. I thought of her phrase, "You complicate things," and felt a metallic taste rise in my tongue. I shoved my hand in my pocket, touched the baggage tag and a crumpled paper I didn't even remember putting there. The bus ticket to the station. Years later, that night would return in pieces. The shine of the floor, the voice on the loudspeaker, her hand smoothing her hair. At the time it was just a corridor too long. A social worker offered me a blanket. I accepted it like someone accepts a verdict. Time, which can be a knife, is sometimes also an archive. 14 years after that metal chair, I'm in my small studio, amber light on, microphone blinking red. I found in an old backup a voicemail I had never heard her voice, cold as the blue sign. "Don't show up." I press play again, and the air in the room changes density. Press rec. My breathing enters the track like someone promising a story without cuts. And I think without saying, if she left me at the airport, I learned to build my own arrival. I save the file with the name terminal under 27b.wave, and before closing the laptop, a notification lights up. Event update, vow renewal. Family and close friends only. The cursor blinks, as if calling me back to the gate. In my studio, time smells of dust and old coffee. The walls are covered with gray foam panels, and each cutout is an attempt to muffle memories that still scream. I work with sound, but sometimes I feel that silence pays my bills. There's a frame on the wall, a map of my life at 15, cut into pieces. The bus ticket, the luggage stub, a copy of the airport report, the torn baggage tag. Each item taped down with transparent adhesive, as if I still needed to prove to someone that I existed in that cold support room. I open the computer, the editing program already loading the file, terminal under 27b.wave. Her voice, crystalline and distant, echoes. "Don't show up." There's no anger in the intonation. Just disdain, the kind of indifference that erases you better than any scream. I lower the volume, close my eyes and let the headphones rest on my neck. In the monitor's reflection, I see a woman who survived the most subtle type of abandonment, the one done with rational justifications. The episode I'm producing is called Archiving to Survive. It's about how we try to organize chaos when family transforms love into protocol. As I record the introduction, my voice comes out calm, almost serene. They say time heals, but time also archives. And whoever controls the archive controls the version of the story. Today I tell mine. The red rec light turns on, and I feel my throat vibrate. On the desk, there's a pile of labeled folders. School, hospital, airport, family. Inside each one, papers I collected myself with an archaeologist's patience. The 2011 report card with a note from the counselor. Guardian absent for 3 months. The intake report with my incomplete name. Messages from my aunt saying my mother was too busy, and that I should understand. Sometimes pain is so methodical it seems organized. I created an audio file for each memory. One with the sound of bags rolling on the airport floor, another with my own breathing when the social worker asked, "Want to call anyone?" I didn't. Today, when I listen, I realize that the 15-year-old girl responded with a silence that said, "Nobody's coming." After the abandonment, I lived with temporary families, then in student housing until I got my scholarship for college. I studied journalism, but sound chose me. The first microphone I bought was with money from an internship at a community radio station. I remember the feeling of recording my voice for the first time and thinking, so this is how you exist, when someone listens to you. Today my voice reaches thousands. Beautiful irony. The same echo born from absence became shelter for others. The podcast I created, Forgotten Frequencies, became a space where Black women tell stories the world tried to erase. One of them, a 68-year-old woman, said in an interview, "I kept my secrets for decades, but now I record so I don't die silent." That phrase became tattooed on me without ink. At the end of the recording, I open the email. The inbox is a minefield of memories. At the top, a new notification. Vow renewal, 15 years of union, Claire and Michael, family and close friends only. Claire. Not mom. Not mother. Claire, the woman who once said I complicated her image. I open the invitation. The design is luxurious, golden, with serif letters. The location, an event hall in Miami. The detail that paralyzes me. The date and time coincide with the launch of the new podcast episode. I laugh without humor. The kind of coincidence that feels like destiny wanting revenge. I decide to turn that email into material. I write in my notebook. Theme. What happens when abandonment becomes public? Objective. Show how silence is also a form of violence. Material. Old audios, records, emails, invitations. I open a new folder on the computer. Project Azure. Inside it, I save the digital invitation and begin to assemble a recording script. File name. Episode 15, The Family Image. As I type, I notice something that draws a nearly childlike laugh from me. 15 years of marriage. 15 years since the airport. The number repeats like a cosmic stamp. I breathe deeply and leave the microphone on. You know, I say to the camera, some families are like airports. They pretend to receive you, but leave you waiting in the wrong room. I speak directly, unrehearsed, with the calm of someone who no longer needs to shout to be heard. If anyone out there has had to invent a home after being left at the door of one, if you've been called dramatic for remembering too much, stay with me. Subscribe. Here, every memory has a right to a microphone. At the end of the recording, I close the laptop, but the screen's reflection still shows me. The woman who at 15 was forgotten at an airport now prepares to land in her own mother's story. A notification blinks in the corner of the screen, a direct message from an anonymous account. I'm from the event team. I think you'll want to see this. The file the anonymous person sent me was a PDF document with the logo of a sophisticated event company. Title: Planning Vow Renewal, Claire and Michael. The text described every detail: the menu, the decoration, the schedules. I read line by line until I got to the part that felt like a punch. Family presentation. Speech from the children Luke, Emma, and Jordan. No mention of my name. Nothing. No space for me, as if I were a mistake that time had corrected. I closed the document and stared at the ceiling, listening to the constant sound of the fan mixed with the beating of my own heart. The feeling was the same as the airport, only more silent, more intimate. That day, the abandonment was physical. Now it was administrative. A formatted, reviewed, and approved file by her. I grabbed a cup of cold coffee and sat in front of the corkboard. The red ribbons connected past and present, reminding me that exclusion isn't an isolated act, it's a series of small edits. Again, I replayed the scenes from my adolescence like rewinding a tape. The lunches where she said, "Speak softer, dear, you're too intense." The photos where they placed me at the end of the table, always next to the blown-out light, where my face appeared darkened. The trips to the hairdresser where I cried while they straightened my hair until my scalp burned. And the times when she said, disguising her boredom, "You're beautiful, you just need refinement." I learned to be the polite silence that fit in family photos. Now, at 29, I saw everything with documentary clarity. I opened the old family drive, the one she shared with Happy Moment Records, and began to observe the chronology. 2012, 2014, 2017, 2019. In all the folders, the same party scenes, trips and dinners. The same framing, the same social smile. I was in some old photos before the airport. After I disappeared. The captions continued, but the stories changed. Where once it read us, now it said them. What hurt most was realizing that digital memories are selective, but the heart doesn't have a delete key. And then I realized, Maybe the podcast wasn't just about telling what happened, it was about restoring what was erased. I opened the microphone and started recording without a script. There's a type of shame that isn't yours, but is handed to you as inheritance. They teach you to carry it with elegance, with gratitude. They say it's so you don't embarrass anyone. And you grow up thinking that love is that fitting within someone else's limits. Press pause. Breathe. The email notification sound echoed through the room. It was from a distant aunt, one of those who always preferred sending subtle jabs instead of affection. Subject: Dear, try to understand your mother. I opened the attachment. It was a seating chart for the event. The title in golden letters. Seating chart. My name was there crossed out in red ink. Took me a few seconds to understand. The columns showed the names of confirmed guests, and next to mine the note, "Do not include at dinner possible unwanted presents." I leaned on the desk, my chest burning. The file was dated 2 weeks ago, meaning recent. Done calmly. Validated. That red line was more than an exclusion, it was a signature. I grabbed my phone, took a photo and saved it in the evidence folder. Then I sat down again and stayed silent for long minutes. In the midst of shock, an old memory came. Me at 13, helping my mother review a speech for church. She said, "Words have power, daughter. And a wrong comma can destroy a reputation." Back then, I didn't know that a red line could also destroy a daughter. In the monitor's reflection, I noticed my eyes welling up, but dry. I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because the pain had already become another language. I grabbed the notebook and wrote firmly, "I'm not an unwanted presence. I'm an undeniable record." And for the first time since the airport, I felt something different from abandonment. Felt strategy. I opened the aunt's email and replied, "Thanks for the spreadsheet. It helped me more than you can imagine." Before going to sleep, the phone vibrated again. An anonymous Instagram notification. "Check your DMs, we have recordings from the ceremony rehearsal." I spent the early morning staring at the computer screen like someone facing a mirror that finally tells the truth. The anonymous link led to a folder of short videos, recorded by one of the event photographers during the ceremony rehearsals. I pressed play on the first one. The hall was large, lit by golden lamps, with arrangements of white flowers and a glass walkway. My mother Claire, as she now presented herself, was in the center of the video, dressed in pearl beige, rehearsing the moment when she would walk alongside her husband, while the officiant said, "Renewing their vows before family." The sound of soft piano played in the background. My breath caught in my throat when I heard a female voice, off camera, ask, "And the oldest daughter, will she participate?" The pause was long. Then my mother answered without hesitation, "She prefers to stay out of these things. She's too intense." The discreet laughter around filled the audio like invisible applause. I stopped the video. The cursor blinked over the playback bar. That phrase, "too intense," had accompanied me since childhood. It was the polite way she used to diminish me in public, like saying, "She's not bad, just inconvenient." A pretty adjective to hide an ugly prejudice. I opened the second video. She and her husband were rehearsing their lines. "Today we celebrate love, union, and the family we chose to build." The word "chose" pierced me. Choose. I hadn't been chosen. I had been removed from the photo. The camera turned, showing the children, now teenagers, smiling and laughing together, rehearsing the toast. One of the boys joked, "And if the other one shows up, what do we do?" My mother laughed softly. "She won't show up." I paused the video, and for a moment silence seemed the loudest sound in the world. I remained still for a few minutes, staring at the monitor's reflection. There was a detail in the corner of the image, an oval mirror, ornate, hanging in the hall. And in its reflection, for an instant, I saw the photographer herself holding her phone. Her face was the same as the anonymous account that had sent me the link. Maybe she knew what she was doing. I opened the terminal on 27b.wav file, and overlaid my mother's voice with the audio from the rehearsal. "Don't show up. She prefers to stay out of these things." The sequence sounded like a choreography of denial. I recorded everything in a new project and named it Episode 16, The Family That Doesn't Fit in the Photo. The anger rising in me wasn't that of a wounded teenager. It was the surgical calm of someone who understands the mechanics of exclusion and decides to dismantle it piece by piece. I knew that feeling wasn't enough. It needed to be recorded. And this time, it wouldn't be in a hidden diary. I grabbed my portable recorder and left. I went to the airport, the same one. The walls were now covered with digital panels, the benches replaced, but the blue sign still blinked. Gate 27B. I recorded the ambient sound, the metallic echo of footsteps, the noise of baggage carts. Returning is an act of war and healing at the same time, I murmured into the microphone. As I walked through the terminal, I noticed a man in uniform sweeping the floor. He seemed to recognize me. "You're the woman from the old case, right?" he asked with a low voice. "Stop. What case?" "A girl alone years ago. They made an internal report. I was on the night shift. I never forgot. You cried without crying. It was hard for everyone." My chest tightened. "Does that report still exist?" He scratched his chin. "I think so. In the security archive. I can try to see." We exchanged contacts. Hours later, back at my studio, I received an email from him with the subject, Report November 18, 2011. The attachment was a scanned, yellowed and formal image. Unaccompanied minor, 15 years old, informed absence of legal guardian. At the end, a signature. Removal authorized by family member S. Hayes. Hayes. My Aunt Sandra. The same one who had sent me the spreadsheet with the crossed-out name. For a moment, the air left the room. I closed my eyes, trying to process what that meant. She not only knew about the abandonment, she participated. She was the one who signed the removal, who invented the story to hide what really happened. I pressed rec on the recorder and began to speak, voice firm. Family lies have an expiration date. And the first sign they're rotting is when they start to smell in other people's memories. On the computer screen, I opened the report, the photos of the spreadsheet, the videos from the rehearsal. Everything was there. The invisible line connecting past to present. This time I wasn't the forgotten file. I was the file coming back to reopen the case. Before closing the laptop, another notification appeared. An unknown number sent a short audio, a woman's voice, breathless. "She won't be able to handle it if this comes out. Don't do this, please." The sender, Aunt Sandra. The aunt's audio played on loop during the early morning. Her voice had that soft tone of someone trying to stitch a plea for forgiveness from manipulation fabric. "She won't be able to handle it. You know how sensitive your mother is." I let the sound roll while I made coffee, the noise of the coffee maker competing with the hiss of the recording. With each repetition I asked myself, sensitive to what? To the pain she caused or to the consequence of being caught? I opened the window. The morning wind brought the smell of rain and a distant sound of the city waking up. I breathed deeply, the taste of bitter coffee mixing with anger. I grabbed my phone and opened my aunt's conversation. I typed, deleted, typed again. I ended up sending just one sentence. "What hurts more, what she did or what you all hid?" She viewed it but didn't respond. The house was immersed in a thick silence, the kind of silence that precedes decision. I walked to the studio and turned on the microphone. "Some people confuse forgiveness with erasure," I began, voice firm. "But erasing doesn't heal. It just repeats the crime." While recording, the aunt's audio remained open in a tab, as if breathing behind my words. I wanted people to hear the sound of hesitation, of the polished cowardice that families use to disguise the racism they practice in secret. I stopped the recording and stared at the corkboard. The red lines, the papers, the clippings, everything seemed like an emotional autopsy. With each attached proof, a piece of my childhood gained form. Suddenly, I realized I wasn't just reconstructing the past. I was building a complaint. I opened the airport email and attached the report he had sent me, with my aunt's signature. Then I added the screenshots from the family group, her messages and the video of my mother's rehearsal. The file was over 200 megabytes. I named it, Project_Claire evidence. I pressed play on the intercom audio I recorded years later, when I visited my mother for the first time after college. Can't receive you now, dear, we're having dinner. Family gathering. The same phrase, the same echo, the same gate. My chest throbbed. The sound of her own voice, firm, repeating family, sounded like a sentence. How many more times would I need to prove I existed? That's when I decided to publish the first excerpt on my podcast. No naming names, not yet. Just the sound. The click of the gate closing. Sometimes, I said in the episode, the sound of a lock says more about the soul of a house than any speech about love. The episode aired at 9 p.m. In less than an hour, the comment section was full of messages. People who had also been left outside, not airports, but dinners, birthdays, meetings, conversations. Black women telling about parents who said, "You're exaggerating. You're imagining things." Each comment was an open wound speaking to another. The pain that was once loneliness was now language. I spent the rest of the night responding to messages, until a specific comment froze me. "I'm from the catering company hired for the event. There's something you need to see." I responded immediately. In less than 10 minutes, an email arrived. A PDF file with the company logo and underneath handwritten notes. Serve only guests from the main list. Avoid unconfirmed visitors. Daughter. The note, recognizable, was written in my mother's handwriting. I closed my eyes and her face appeared, clear, precise, saying, "Don't make a scene." The kind of phrase that doesn't shout but marks with iron. I breathed deeply, feeling the lump in my throat transform into something sharper, a kind of clarity. I saved the file in the evidence folder, renaming it as Catering a Document to PDF. With each proof, the story became less about feelings and more about facts. And that's exactly what gave me strength, knowing that what destroyed me could now absolve me. I opened the microphone again, voice calmer than expected. They think the shame is ours, that we were the ones who erred by being born outside the frame. But every structure has cracks, and that's where the light comes in. The following silence was dense, as if the air itself listened to me. If you've ever had to shrink yourself to fit in someone else's room, I continued. If you've ever erased your own voice to keep someone's peace, like comment, leave it on record. Because maybe no one has told you this yet, but you're not the problem. You're the proof. I closed the episode and published it without thinking. The feeling was physical, like opening a window after years of suffocation. I went to sleep late, my head spinning. Before closing my eyes, I imagined my mother's face reading the name of the file I now controlled. Project_Claire evidence. The phone sound woke me hours later. A new message without a name, just a photo. The event hall under construction, and in the corner of the image, an open box with my name written in blue pen. Inside, an old videotape marked with a date. November 18, 2011. The sun had barely risen when I opened the message. The photo of the box seemed to have been taken hastily. The framing crooked, the yellowish light. On the lid my name. Nia, the nickname only my mother used. For a second I felt the ground sway. It was as if the past had suddenly decided to answer me. I sent a message to the anonymous number. "Where did you find this?" The response came in seconds. "In the backstage of the hall." She asked to keep it among old materials. I don't think she knows it still exists. Can I get it? Today, 5 p.m. Side entrance. Bring ID. The words blinked on the screen like a password. I spent all day trying to concentrate, but my body vibrated with electric anxiety. The videotape was a key. If it was what I imagined, a recording of the night I was left at the airport, nothing more would be deniable. At 4:45 p.m., I parked the car in an alley behind the hall. The wind carried the smell of fresh paint and sawn wood. A young employee was waiting for me with a badge hanging from his neck. "You're Nia." He nodded. He handed me the box. "She ordered everything burned, but I thought it was wrong." This seemed personal. I thanked him and got in the car before he could ask anything. The weight of the tape was small but seemed to contain the world. At home I placed the box on the table, next to the computer and the recorder. I grabbed scissors and cut the adhesive tape sealing the lid. Inside there was a note, folded in four. In case I need to remember one day why I did what I did. I recognized my mother's handwriting. Tape was mini DV format, old. Fortunately, I had a media converter I used in old interview recordings. I connected the cable, breathed deeply and pressed play. The shaky image showed the airport. The blue sign at gate 27B. My mother, in a light dress, holding her phone. Me behind with a purple backpack. The camera wobbled, filmed by someone from afar, maybe my aunt. The audio was full of noise, but you could hear. "She doesn't need to come, Sandra. I'll handle it." My voice emerges, weak in the background. "But Mom, why can't I go?" She turns. Her face fills the entire screen in close-up saying, "Because you embarrass me, Nia." The recording ends abruptly. The air became heavy, as if the walls were shrinking. For a few seconds I just listened to the sound of my own pulse. Then I noticed something in the corner of the video. The reflection of a third person, a blonde woman holding a lapel microphone. What did that mean? The scene had been recorded with professional equipment. I rummaged through the box and found a smaller envelope, stamped with the name of an advertising agency. Brightline Media. Inside, an old contract. Advertising campaign, Modern Family featuring Claire Hayes and children. My stomach turned. She was filming a commercial that day. An ad about family values for an airline. That was it. I wasn't left at the airport. I was edited out of a marketing campaign. The absurdity drew from me a laugh that sounded like a sob. The kind of humor born when pain becomes so clear it's impossible to deny. I grabbed the microphone and started recording in real time, without a script, just with my heart pulsing in the sound. I thought the abandonment had been an impulse, a momentary shame. But no. It was production. Lighting. Camera. Rehearsal. My mother cut me out of life like cutting a scene that's off-tone. I opened the editing software and overlaid the tape video with the audio of my narration. The grainy image of her saying, "You embarrass me," repeated like a mantra. I wanted the whole world to see that, not as scandal, but as documentation. While it rendered the file, I thought about the line separating exposure from liberation. I didn't want revenge. I wanted context. I wanted justice. But part of me knew what I was about to do would have consequences. Before finishing, I added a final caption to the recording. "For every child who was cut from their own film, now you're the one holding the camera." I sent the video to a secure server, with restricted access, and scheduled publication for the night of the event. The rest of the day I spent organizing the evidence: airport report, catering contract, seating chart, and now the video. I assembled a physical folder, labeled in red, "Evidence Family." On each page, a mark of reconstruction. At 10 p.m., the phone vibrated with a new message from Aunt Sandra. "You're playing with fire. Think about the consequences." I only responded, "Don't worry. I learned to survive in flames." Pressed upload. The progress advanced slowly, 5%, 12%, 27%. When it reached 100%, the room light flickered for a second, as if the universe blinked with me. The sound of an incoming email cut the silence. Subject: Urgent official invitation, vow renewal, live stream. My mother had turned the event into a spectacle, and I already had the perfect script to interrupt the show. The first reaction I had seeing the invitation was to laugh. Not with joy, with disbelief. Live stream. She was going to broadcast her own farce, like displaying a trophy polished with lies. The perfect family, in vibrant colors, professional lighting and instrumental music. For a second I closed my eyes and imagined the plan. Her smiling at the altar, guests clapping, cameras capturing every gesture. Everything scripted. Everything controlled. Everything except me. I put the phone on the table, opened the computer and looked at the red file folder. That was the real script. And for the first time I was the director. I spent hours assembling a detailed document, almost like a shooting plan. I named it Operation Mirror. I divided it into 3 parts. The revelation, the 2011 tape video, with the phrase, Because you embarrass me, Nia. The continuity, the recent audio of my mother saying, "Avoid unconfirmed visitors, daughter." The closing, my narration in the background with the caption, "Some cuts aren't editing. They're blood." I programmed the video to be published at 8:30 p.m., the same time the ceremony would be broadcast. But that wasn't enough. I wanted the impact to be more than virtual. I wanted her face to see itself reflected in the truth, in real time. I grabbed my notepad and noted each step. Create a mirror site, familyimageproject.com. Insert the video on autoplay screen with the opening phrase, "Live stream backstage of truth." Purchase paid ads on social networks targeted to event guests. I used the seating chart list as a base. Program automation so that when the video went live, guests would receive the link by message. While I prepared everything, I felt something curious. Peace. Not that peace of someone who forgets, but of someone who finally understands their own power. The sound of typing filled the room. Each click was a heartbeat. At 3 a.m. the plan was ready. Tested everything. It worked. I opened the microphone and began recording a letter, more for me than for her. "You left me at the airport like someone canceling a delayed flight. But destiny doesn't get cancelled, Mom. Gets rescheduled. And tomorrow, when the lights come on and cameras roll, the departure will be mine." I saved the audio. I called it terminalsfinal.wave. The next day, I woke up to an unexpected notification. The anonymous video I partially published, the gate click, had gone viral. Thousands of comments, profiles tagging the podcast, people asking to know more. The internet had sniffed out the truth even before I showed it whole. And now there was no stopping the train. In the afternoon, I bought a simple black dress, matte fabric. Something that wouldn't draw attention until the right moment. I grabbed the car and drove to the event location. The security guards at the entrance ignored me. A press team had been hired, and I had the right badge. I entered without needing to lie. The hall was huge, full of lights and white arrangements, like a living replica of the rehearsal videos. The ambient music was calculated jazz. My mother, at the altar, radiated that kind of elegance that only exists when you have something to hide. I stayed in the back near the sound team. The operator looked at me curiously. "You're from the broadcast." "I'm from the complimentary audio team," I replied calmly. He nodded, distracted. While the audience settled, I discreetly opened my laptop. The mirror site screen was already loaded. Just one click separated me from the truth. I waited for the moment when the officiant announced, "Today we celebrate 15 years of love, union, and family." That word family sounded like a trigger. My fingers trembled, but not from fear. From precision. Pressed enter. At that moment, the screen behind the altar started blinking. First the airport video. Then the intercom audio. Finally her image with the frozen phrase, "Because you embarrass me, Nia." The hall plunged into silence. The glasses stopped in mid-air. Piano ceased. And my mother's voice echoed through the speakers as if coming from the ceiling itself. Someone shouted, "Is this fake?" But before she could react, the caption appeared on screen. "Family is those who don't erase you from the picture." While people murmured and cameras turned in confusion, I felt a vibration in my pocket. I looked at my phone, a message from my half-brother, whom I'd never met. "I'm here. And I'm with you." The phone's vibration still echoed in my hand when I raised my eyes to the chaos. The hall, previously rehearsed and choreographed, now seemed like a field of broken echoes. The initial silence had broken into murmurs, then into nervous voices, and finally into muffled shouts. My mother was standing, motionless, looking at the screen like someone seeing a ghost emerge from within their own image. Her husband, pale, tried to disconnect the projection cables. The guests whispered, cell phone cameras rose like weapons. And me, I just observed. From afar, calm, with my body firm and my heart beating in a new rhythm. It was strange to realize that fear had changed sides. The transmission still ran the overlaid video, the phrases, the airport audio. People looked from the screen to her, from the screen to me, trying to piece it together. Then the sound technician ran to the computer, trying to cut the transmission, but the cables were already locked. The final image froze. My mother in the pearl dress saying, "You embarrass me," while over her face the caption pulsed, "The shame isn't for those who were left. It's for those who left." The hall lights went out. And the sound that followed was the most powerful of all, the dry sound of someone sobbing in the front row. It took a few seconds until I realized it was one of her daughters, my half-sister, crying silently, her shoulders trembling. She approached slowly, holding her phone, the screen still showing the video on loop. "Is it true?" she asked, voice shaking. My mother didn't respond. She just stepped back, stumbling over a flower vase. Her husband tried to manage the situation, but it was too late. People were filming, some were crying, others backing away in discomfort. It was impossible to disguise. The truth had a face, sound, and documentary proof. I grabbed my phone. My brother's message blinked again. "I'm here. And I'm with you." I looked around, trying to find him. And there he was, tall, brown-skinned, face similar to mine, standing next to the buffet. For an instant time stopped. Our eyes met, and I noticed something I didn't expect. There was no pity in his gaze. There was recognition. I walked to the stage. Each step seemed to echo through the speakers. People opened a path, some in respectful silence, others whispering. "Climb the 3 steps." I picked up the microphone the officiant had dropped. The sound of impact still reverberated when I spoke, voice serene. "For 15 years they told me I was the mistake. That my silence was politeness. That my absence was choice. But what you just saw is what it really means to be erased from your own story." I looked at the audience, at the tense faces, hands clasped between knees, forgotten glasses. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because no one should have to beg to be remembered." A murmur ran through the hall. From the corner of the room, I heard my brother's voice. "She's my sister. And I'm not going to pretend she isn't." It was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. People turned to him. My mother's face contracted in disbelief. He climbed onto the stage and stood beside me. We said nothing, the gesture was enough. I still held the microphone, my hand steady. "If this story touches you," I said, looking directly at one of the cameras broadcasting live, "share it. Share it so that no other daughter is left waiting at an airport or outside a gate, for thinking the problem is being who she is." The phrase hung in the air. And in that instant something changed in the atmosphere. It wasn't noise, it was breathing. A kind of collective exhalation, a heavy relief, as if the entire hall understood that the spectacle had ended, and the real act began there. The sound technician approached hesitantly. "Want me to turn it off?" he asked. I looked at him and smiled calmly. "No, let it play. Truth also deserves ambient sound." My brother laughed lightly, the nervous laugh of someone relearning to exist. My mother took a step forward, trying to say something, but the words dissolved before they came out. The audience watched in silence. No one applauded. No one booed. They just watched. The lights came back on slowly. The transmission, without cuts, showed my brother and me side by side. The final caption appeared on its own, as if the system understood the moment. "No family image can erase the blood of abandonment." The video ended. The ambient music returned, a light piano, almost sad. People began to leave in silence, as after a funeral. I approached the edge of the stage. My mother was still there, sitting, dress wrinkled, face pale. I passed her without saying anything. The revenge wasn't the scandal. It was the mirror. Outside, the night air seemed different. My brother caught up with me. "You did right," he said simply, without heroism. "No. I just gave the sound back to the story," I replied. As we walked to the car, a notification vibrated on my phone. The event video, my video, was already rising on the networks. Thousands of shares in minutes. And the title someone used, without me asking, said, "The daughter the world didn't see until today." The next morning I woke up with my phone vibrating non-stop. The notification seemed like a rain of voices, dripping one by one in the silence of the room. I opened the screen and saw the impossible. My face everywhere. News sites, opinion profiles, women's portals, black culture blogs. Different headlines, the same story. Woman exposes mother at live ceremony and reveals 15 years of abandonment. The video, edited and reposted by hundreds of people, had already surpassed 1 million views. There was no containing the avalanche. And for the first time I didn't want to. I put on a simple hoodie and sat in front of the computer. The podcast player still showed the last published episode, Terminal 27B. The audience had tripled overnight. The message boxes were full of stories from women writing me. I was also left at the gate. My mother said I was a mistake. Thank you for opening the file for all of us. I read each one slowly. I cried silently, not from pain, but from recognition. The loneliness that had accompanied me since 15 now dissolved into something collective, dense, beautiful. I was no longer the girl forgotten at the airport. I was the echo of too many silenced voices. On the other side of the screen, my mother's reaction took shape. A video of her appeared on the networks, a recording made hastily, in a neutral setting, probably the Home Office. She tried to maintain composure. I made mistakes, yes, but it was a moment of fragility. Exposure is not the way. Family is resolved with silence, with love. The same discourse as always, the idea that speaking is aggression, that silence is elegance. But now the entire country responded in chorus. It's not love if it needs to be hidden. Closed the video. There was no anger. Just a kind of old sadness, already dry, that I knew well. My brother sent me a short message. The press is calling her. And me. I responded. Let them talk. Truth isn't news, it's record. Hours later, I received an unexpected email from a documentary producer. They wanted to transform my story into an episode of a series about reconciliation and identity. Smiled. Ironic how life seems to go in circles. From a fake advertising campaign to a real documentary. But this time I would be the producer, not the extra cut from the image. In the afternoon I went for a walk. The sky was gray, the kind of light that reveals what the sun hides. On the way, some people recognized me not with the invasive look of the curious, but with silent respect. A black woman stopped me on the sidewalk and said, "You did what we always wanted to do, put pain on the microphone." I hugged that unknown woman and felt a warmth no headline could translate. Back at the studio I found dozens of new messages. Among them one made me stop. Sender Luke Hayes. Subject: I want to know you properly. It was my younger brother, the same one who, the night before, had climbed on stage and said, "She's my sister." I opened the email. I grew up hearing you were complicated. Yesterday I saw you were real. I want to understand the part of the story they hid from me. I read and reread. My heart accelerated in a sweet way, almost childlike. I responded, "The story isn't about who was wrong, Luke. It's about who had the courage to look at the mistake and not pretend they didn't see it." I sent it and soon after recorded another audio. My voice came out calm, without theatricality. The consequences of truth aren't punishment. They're liberation. Shame, when exposed to light, evaporates. And when it evaporates, it leaves what was always there. Dignity. I published the new episode. Family isn't image, it's choice. The views exploded in minutes. But it wasn't about numbers. It was about memory. Later the phone rang. It was a reporter. "Would you accept a live interview?" Your mother also confirmed participation. For a moment I hesitated. But something in me already knew the answer. Yes. But only if it airs without cuts. I hung up the phone and took a deep breath. On the computer screen, the podcast's live transmission showed the counter rising, thousands of people waiting for the next episode. The scheduled title blinked, ready to premiere. Live, the table that was missing a place. And this time the whole world would have a seat. The studio was immersed in solemn silence before the live recording. The microphone blinked in red. The luminous indicator that once scared me now seemed like a steady heartbeat, the heart of what I had become. On the wall, framed, the note I found in the tape box. In case I need to remember one day why I did what I did. I kept it there on purpose. To remember that memory no longer needs to hurt me. Now it serves me. The network team arrived early. They set up lights, tested audio, positioned cameras. The producer, a man with a tense look, came to me with a clipboard in his hands. "Your mother confirmed. Arrives in 15 minutes. He nodded. I didn't ask anything more. I sat in front of the mirror for a moment. I didn't use professional makeup, nor did I let them fix me up too much. I wanted my face to speak without filter. My reflected image seemed the synthesis of everything. The girl from the airport, the woman who edited silence, the daughter who tired of asking for explanations. The studio clock marked 7:59 p.m. The reporter announced, "We're going live in 5, 4, 3. The opening played with the soft sound of piano. In the center, 2 armchairs. On one side me. On the other, my mother Claire. She wore the same shade of pearl beige as always, as if the neutrality of color could replace the neutrality of actions. For an instant, I felt the urge to get up and leave. But no. I hadn't waited 14 years to run from the conversation. The reporter began. Today, the country follows a reunion that reignites debates about forgiveness, family racism, and public image. With us, Nia Hayes, documentarian and creator of the podcast Forgotten Frequencies, and Claire Hayes. The lights fixed. The sound of microphones captured both our breathing. Dense silence. She was the first to speak. "I just want to say I never wanted to hurt anyone. I did what I thought was best at the time." The old defense. I paused before responding. The difference between intention and impact is what builds or destroys lives. You wanted to protect your image, Mom. I had to build mine from scratch. She looked at me for the first time in years, truly. "You don't understand the pressure I lived under. And you don't understand the loneliness I lived." The reporter stayed quiet, letting the dialogue flow as if she knew this was history happening in real time. "I don't want to expose you," she said, voice beginning to fail. "You already did that yourself," I replied. "And I just recorded the audio." Stop. Breathe. "What you taught me unintentionally is that silence is complicit. And I wasn't born to be complicit." She tried to contain tears. The audience, on the other side of the transmission, reacted in comments, filling the screen with hearts and supportive phrases. The camera approached our faces. The reporter finally intervened. "Nia, if you could say something to that 15-year-old girl who waited at the boarding gate, what would you say?" I looked at the floor for an instant. The studio disappeared. I went back to that cold metal bench, to the distant sound of flights, to the echo of a speaker saying, "Final call." I breathed deeply and responded. I'd tell her she didn't need anyone's permission to exist. Silence. My mother lowered her face. Tears fell discreetly, heavy, soundless. I didn't interrupt her. The revenge was complete not through suffering, but through revelation. The camera moved even closer. "Family," I continued, "isn't who puts you in a photo. It's who sees you when the image goes out of focus." The audience reacted. The reporter closed the segment. "Thank you for trusting us with this conversation. May the sound of truth inspire those still living in silence." The lights dimmed slowly. When the live signal turned off, it was just the two of us. My mother wiped her face and murmured, "I didn't know it was possible to lose a daughter twice. And I didn't know it was possible to recover a mother without asking." She looked at me like someone who doesn't know whether to hug or ask forgiveness. There was no hug. But there was also no more lie. The truth finally breathed between us. At the studio exit, I found my brother waiting for me. He smiled without saying anything and extended his hand. In his palm, a bracelet made of colored beads. The same ones I wore at the airport, now remade. "I thought this still belonged to you," he said. I put it on my wrist. Fit perfectly. On the sidewalk before getting in the car, I looked at the sky full of heavy clouds. The phone vibrated, streaming notification. Special transmission. The Hayes family public reconciliation. I smiled lightly. This time I was also in the picture. The following days were a whirlwind. The live interview spread through the country like a silent fire, the kind that doesn't destroy, but illuminates what was previously invisible. The headlines now changed tone. Mother and daughter confront silence live and the country watches. I read the comments one by one, not out of vanity, but out of a kind of duty, to understand the impact of returning sound to a story. I received messages from people I'd never met. One woman wrote, "My son was also left outside a door. Today I opened it for him. Thank you for showing me how." Another said, "I'll never apologize for existing again." These phrases pierced me deeper than any applause. I realized that my pain, when spoken, stopped being a wound and became a tool. Meanwhile, my mother disappeared for a few days. No public appearances, no response video. Until one Sunday morning she called me. I answered with a calm heart, without resentment, without expectation. Her voice on the other end was lower and for the first time genuine. "Nia, there's something I need to return to you." We arranged to meet at a discreet corner cafe, where no one would recognize our tired faces. When I arrived, she was already there. Without makeup, without rigid posture. She seemed smaller, human. She placed a shoebox on the table, wrapped with a faded ribbon. "I kept this to give you when I had courage," she said. Opened slowly. Inside, there was a photo mine at 6 years old in the garden of the old house, with her holding me by the waist. On the back of the photo, in trembling handwriting, a dedication. "For my girl who shines, even when the world turns off the lights." I looked at her, not knowing what to say. She lowered her eyes. "I stopped seeing you when I started looking through others' eyes. And now," yes, "now I'm trying to relearn to look with my own." We stayed silent for a while. It wasn't forgiveness that was there, it was something rarer. Recognition. When we said goodbye, she held my hand and said, "Thank you for not hating me enough to give up on me." I left that cafe feeling the weight of the past dissolve in the air. The streets seemed wider, the sound of the city sharper. It wasn't happiness, it was wholeness. That night I published the last podcast episode. I called it "The Sound That Remained." In it, I told not the story of exposure, but of reconstruction. "Life isn't just made of doors that close," I said in the audio. "Sometimes justice happens when we return, not to knock, but to open from the inside out." While speaking, I used a soundtrack, a sound I recorded at the cafe. The clink of 2 cups touching. Small, symbolic, perfect. When the episode finished, I inserted a deliberate 3-second pause before the closing, the same time it took me to decide to stay at the airport years ago. Then my voice, firm and light. "If you've ever been left behind, breathe. The way back isn't for who abandoned you, it's for yourself." Comments began appearing in real time. Thousands. Each one proof that my story was no longer mine. The cafe video, made by an anonymous customer, began circulating on networks, me and her talking, laughing softly, hands touching on the table. People commented, "This is reparation. This is the sound of love that didn't give up." But I knew the real ending hadn't happened yet. Because stories like this don't end with a hug, they end with choice. And I still had mine to make. That night, the producer's email came back. "We want to transform your story into a feature documentary. Directed by you." Smiled. Life had come full circle. Now it was my turn to tell with script, light and justice. Before sleeping, I went to the window. The sky was clear, the moon full. I grabbed the old note, the one that said, "In case I need to remember why I did what I did," and burned it in a candle flame. As the paper turned to ash, I whispered, "Now I remember for whom I did it." The day of the documentary premiere arrived like a calm wave, without fanfare, without shouts, but carrying the weight of everything that came before. The title shone on the independent cinema screen where everything would begin. Terminal, The Daughter Who Waited. The tickets sold out in less than 2 hours. And outside, a silent line formed. People with discreet signs, black women with firm gazes, mothers holding daughters' hands. No one knew exactly what they expected to see. But everyone seemed to understand they weren't just there to watch, they were there to recognize themselves. I entered through the side door, accompanied by Luke, my brother. My mother also came. Not as a special guest but as part of the cast of life that, finally, accepted to appear whole, without makeup, without control. When our eyes met, I realized the distance between us was no longer a border. It was just space. Space that could now be crossed. The lights went out. The first sound to echo was the same from the airport speakers announcing flights, the dragging of suitcases, and in the background my narrator voice. Some boarding doesn't take you far. Takes you inside. And sometimes that's where we find ourselves. Images passed in respectful silence. The audience breathed together. Some cried in the first few minutes. Others smiled with recognition of small victories, the braided girl assembling a microphone, the adult woman pressing enter on a computer, the echo of a previously silenced voice gaining space. The final scene was simple. The cafe, 2 cups touching, and the phrase projected in white letters on the dark background. Kindness isn't weakness. It's resistance with a clean soul. When the lights came on, no one stood up immediately. It was as if everyone needed a minute to process what they had seen. And then gradually they began to clap. Not those agitated spectacle claps, but the kind of applause born from within a gesture that says, "I understood." The reporter who followed everything from the beginning came to me with the microphone, smiling. "Nia, after everything, the exposure, the reconciliation, the film, what's the message you want to leave for the world?" I thought for a few seconds. I didn't want a rehearsed answer. I wanted truth. So I looked at the camera, with the serenity of someone who no longer needs to prove anything. Skin color should never be a reason to be left out of a table, a portrait, or a family. But when it is, may we learn to build our own table, with our own hands. Silence. Then the applause resumed, this time, collective, overwhelming, full of life. My mother, in the audience, cried again. But there was a difference in the tears. Now they were of liberation. When I approached, she stood up and hugged me. Not like someone asking forgiveness, but like someone accepting the return of what pride almost killed. Luke joined us. And for an instant I felt time stop. The press recorded the scene, but curiously, no one commented on the gesture in words. Because everyone knew, certain reconciliations don't fit in headlines. They only fit in the silence of those who finally understand what belonging is. That night before sleeping, I opened the notebook and looked at the old folder. Operation Mirror. I renamed the file. Now it was called Reflection. And inside, instead of videos of pain, there were clips from the documentary, audio of laughter, screenshots of comments from women saying, "You made me remember my story matters too." I closed my eyes, breathed deeply, and let the sound of the world enter. It was light. It was new. It was mine. Before closing the final podcast episode, I recorded one last narration, not for the audience, but for myself. If life left me at the gate, it was so I would learn to fly alone. And today, while the world watches, I no longer wait for boarding. I pilot. I inserted a pause and concluded with the tone that had become my signature. If this story touched you, if at some point you also waited outside, subscribe. Because we still have much to tell, and every forgotten voice deserves an echo. I sent the file to air. The player rolled. And for the first time since I was 15, I slept knowing that the girl from the airport, the woman with a camera, and the narrator of her own life were finally the same person. The podcast screen showed the final number of listeners. Millions. But what made me smile was a simple comment, anonymous, left just minutes ago. She didn't get revenge. She freed herself. And I knew there that the story had ended not at the gate, but at the arrival.